I'll start with the opening prayer. Almighty God, we pray for your blessing upon this council. Help and prosper its work for the advancement and benefit of its people, so that peace and happiness, unity and justice may be established amongst us all. Amen. Manningham, as the traditional land we now know as Manningham, we pay our respects to Wurundjeri elders, past and present, and value the ongoing contribution to the cultural heritage of Manningham. Manningham Council would also like to acknowledge the contribution made to Manningham over the years by people of diverse backgrounds and cultures. I'd like to welcome everyone who's maybe joining us online tonight to observe our proceedings. As a result of obviously the current COVID restrictions in place here in Victoria, this council meeting is being held virtually. The health and safety of our community and employees is our priority during these uncertain times. We regularly review the conduct of our meetings and will keep you up to date of any changes to meeting arrangements on our website. As with all council meetings, we are taking questions from the public and encourage you to submit these questions in accordance with our normal practice. Our CEO will read out any questions received and a response will be provided where we have the information to hand. If we're unable to provide a meaningful response to your questions, we will take your question on notice and provide a response in writing. We'll deal with a maximum of 2 questions per person and 2 questions on any one issue. If you have more than 2 questions, please submit these additional questions in writing through the normal channels. Council meetings are conducted in accordance with our governance rules, which we happen to be reviewing tonight. I'll introduce each item of business as listed on the agenda, calling it out by number and by reading the title. I'll then call for a mover and a seconder of a motion on the item before opening any debate. Only councillors are able to join the debate on an item. Councillors may adopt the officer's recommendation in the report or propose amendments and supplementary motions. Item 2, apologies and request for leave of absence. I'd now like to confirm all the councillors we have in attendance. Councillors, if you could raise your hands as I call your name so that I can acknowledge that. So we have Deputy Mayor Councillor Anna Chen.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Deirdre Diamante.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Jeff Goff. Could you just unmute? Thanks, Councillor Goff.
Some reason it's not doing it. Yes, I'm present.
Could you mute now? Thanks. Councillor Michelle Kiwanis.
Present.
Councillor Carly Lang.
Present.
Councillor Thomas Lightbody.
Present.
Thank you. And Councillor Laura Main.
Present.
Councillor Stephen Main.
Here, sir.
Thank you. Councillors, there are no apologies. Councillors, can you please confirm by show of hands that you can see and hear everyone else? Thank you. Great. Thank you, councillors. Item 3, prior notification of conflict of interest. No prior notifications of conflict of interest have been received. Councillors, would anyone like to give a notice of a conflict of interest? No, thank you, councillors. Item 4, confirmation of minutes. Do I have a mover for this motion? Councillor Goff, could you unmute? Still muted, Councillor Goff. Do I have another mover? I'll move. Councillor Chen.
And Mr. Mayor, I move that the minutes of the council meeting held on 27 July 2021 be confirmed.
Thank you. And do I have a seconder?
I second the
Councillor.
motion.
Thank you, Councillor Whitebody. I'll put that motion. Those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. I'll just pause. Councillor Goff, could we just check that your microphone, you're having some issues there?
I'm having issues with actually you're breaking up and it's stopping and starting.
Okay, my apologies.
No, yeah,
It might be.
It's breaking up, so it's not continuous. It's all right. Keep going.
It's not too bad. Mayor, I think just keep going. See how we go.
I think I'll just change some settings on my computer. That might be better, hopefully. Is that better, Councillor?
So far.
Thank you. Councillor Goff, if you could just mute again, thank you. Okay, so sorry, councillors and public for the technical difficulties, but this is Zoom. Item 5.1, passing of former Councillor Chuah, Fred Chuah. Councillors, it's with deep sadness that I must inform you of the recent passing of former Councillor Fred Chuah, JP. Fred served as councillor from 2008 to 2010 and was deputy mayor during 2008-2009. Fred was passionate about community wellbeing and involved in a number of areas, including aged care, social inclusion, and multicultural issues. Fred was a member of a number of committees and boards, including the Ministerial Advisory Council of Senior Victorians, President of Chinese Community Social Services Centre Incorporated, Chairman of Onluck Chinese Nursing Home and Manningham Community Health Services Limited. Do I have a mover for a motion? Councillor Chen. Could you unmute?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that council place on record its sadness at the recent passing of Mr. Fred Chuah. Record its appreciation for the contribution by Mr. Chuah to Manningham Council and the broader community, and extend its sympathy and condolences to Mr. Chuah's family at this very difficult time.
Thank you, Councillor Chen. Do I have a seconder for the motion?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Stephen May. Councillor Chen, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I first met Fred at a community event more than 4 years ago as a newly elected Kunun Ward Councillor. Fred's passion for senior welfare struck a chord with me. Fred was a strong believer of accessible and equitable welfare and aged care facilities to all, including our elderly cold community. A Royal Commission into Aged Care 2021 has found that Australian aged care services are not meeting the needs of culturally and linguistically diverse residents. Fred had the foresight in closing the gap. As a result of his advocacy, a nursing home was set up in the year 2006 to cater the needs of Chinese-speaking elderly. Fred was a proud Manningham resident and always gave constructive feedback to enhance our city amenity. A well-respected community leader and a justice of peace, a person of compassion and willingness to help and support the community in need. Fred, rest in peace, and my condolence to Fred's family.
Thank you, Councillor Chen. Councillor Stephen May.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to echo those sentiments from Councillor Chen. I spent 2 years on council with former Councillor Chuah from 2009 to 2010, when we were both elected for the first time together. And it was very interesting. With a new group of councillors, his credibility and the respect he commanded was instant, and we made him deputy mayor immediately as a new councillor. And then unfortunately, he was only able to serve for 2 years because of health issues, which and it was with his kidneys, which have actually continued to this day, even after a transplant. But he was an energetic new councillor at 64. I do remember Councillor Goff and I actually having a meeting with him after 12 months and asking if he'd step up to be mayor in year 2. And we thought he'd be a great mayor, but he said he was so busy with his other commitments, particularly with the on-like nursing home, that he wasn't ready to take on the role. And I think he would have made a tremendous mayor. His history is he came to Australia from Malaysia in 1961. He became to study chemical engineering at Melbourne Uni and then RMIT. He became the chairman of the Malaysian Students of Victoria, and then he became the national chairman of the Malaysian Students. So he was a community leader as a student, and then right through to his fabulous work with CCSCI and ONLUC and the other groups. He studied chemical engineering, but then went to Auburn College and became a teacher, and was a teacher for many years at Box Hill TAFE, specialising in maths and sciences, and also had management roles there. So a remarkable Australian. His tenure on council was too short, unfortunately, but he was a very wise man. I had a final email from him in 2019. We shared a passion to fight gambling, and he wrote to me and said, "Hi, Stephen, been keeping in touch with your gambling blog. Will you include a Melbourne Cup sweep among family and friends as gambling? ? Met Paula recently and sent my regards to you. Keep active, mate. I have no choice, though, but to stay fit. Kind regards, Fred Chuah." And he did have a very tough final 10 years. It was great that he did get to 77. He actually died in the ONLUC nursing home that he founded. He had his final couple of days of his life there after leaving the Epworth. But I think commiserations to his family and his friends. I know there are literally thousands of people, particularly in the Chinese community, from students he worked with to people he supported, who will have a great deal of respect. And it's such a shame that only 10 people can attend his funeral, because in normal times, there would have been many, many hundreds of people there.
Thank you, Councillor Main. Would any other councillors like to speak to the motion? No? There being no other speakers, I'll put that motion. Those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Item 5.2, Kiwanis Monster Raffle. Councillors, in May this year, the Kiwanis Club of Manningham ran the annual Monster Community Raffle. As you're aware, monies raised from the raffle go towards funding services provided by community organisations, charities, and the Manningham Community Fund. In normal times, the Kiwanis Club would attend a council meeting to present council with the proceeds of the raffle for the Manningham Community Fund. However, as we are conducting our meeting virtually this evening and the Kiwanis are unable to attend in person, I'd like to read a special message from the club regarding this year's raffle, and it reads: "It gives us great pleasure to advise council that from the proceeds of this year's Monster Raffle, $6,292.25 has been deposited into the Manningham Community Fund. This year, we conducted the raffle on council's behalf without the guidance of our friend and colleague, Brother Sean Keefe, who passed away early this year, as well as coping with the ongoing effects of the COVID pandemic. We are pleased to advise that over $18,000 was returned to the Manningham community from ticket sales. This was a great outcome given the times we are currently in. Our club's defining purpose is to improve the world, one community at a time, and we are honoured to be involved and give back to the people of Manningham through the organisation of this raffle. Unfortunately, the Kiwanis Club of Manningham will cease operations in September this year and will no longer be involved in this project. We thank Council for the honour of being involved since its inception over 15 years ago and wish you luck with the future of your program." Thank you for that letter. And on behalf of Council, I would like to thank the Kiwanis Club of Manningham for their support in conducting the Monster Raffle, and on behalf of Council, as well as their tireless work to benefit our local community over that long stretch of time. Your contribution has been greatly valued and will be truly missed. And we wish all the members the best, and hope that you can find other ways to serve the community. Thank you. Again, on behalf of Council. I will now move to item 6, petitions. 6.1, antisocial behaviour at Westfield Shopping Centre, bus interchange, Shrams Ward. Do I have a mover for the motion? Councillor Laura May.
I move that the petition with 6 signatories requesting council to liaise with state and federal government MPs, government agencies and Westfield Doncaster Shopping Centre management to address and resolve issues of antisocial behaviour impacting young people who use the bus interchange be received and referred through to the appropriate officer for consideration.
Thank you, Councillor. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Carly Lang.
I second the motion.
Thank you. And would you like to speak at all to the motion, Councillor?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. Just a comment. I'd just like to say that this is from our Manningham Youth Services Youth Advisory Committee, who Council actually had the opportunity to meet with recently. And I'd just like to say that I'm really glad to see them proactively taking steps towards issues affecting young people in Manningham, and that I want to assure them that this is something that Manningham will definitely, as a council, we will definitely be addressing.
Thank you, Councillor Laura May. Councillor Carly Lang, would you like to speak to the motion at all? I will put that motion. Those in favour? And carried unanimously. Thank you again, councillors. Moving on to item 6.2, residents of Arundel Road West opposing the proposed road closure. This is a Yarra ward. Do I have a mover? Councillor Carly Lang.
I move that the petition with 17 signatories from residents of Arundel Road West and properties fronting onto Arundel Road West, objecting to the proposed closure of Arundel Road and seeking council to reconsider the closure by continuing to provide Arundel Road West residents with 2 viable exits, be received and referred through to the relevant officer for consideration.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Goff. Thank you. Would you like to speak to the motion at all, Councillor Lang?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, tonight I ask you to receive this petition submitted representing 17 residents of Arundel Road West who have expressed that they oppose the permanent closure of Arundel Road West. The petition includes a map of the addresses of the residents opposing the Arundel Road closure. They draw our attention to the fact that that's significant because it's the households near the proposed end who state they will be most severely impacted by the closure, and that that residents in that petition have also rescinded their signatories of support for the proposed closure. Their main concerns in the petition draw to the proposed roundabout area that would be at the end if the proposed closure went ahead, and their concerns are regarding noise being from collection trucks reversing at 6 a.m. and concerns regarding privacy of turning traffic. The petition also includes a traffic engineering report that the residents commissioned between the 2nd of July and the 22nd of July. And the engineers in that report estimate that the traffic flow from Arundel Road West on the east end would not be affected by the proposed closure, but the Arundel Road West end west would have to travel up to 1 kilometre extra to travel along Park Road towards Donvale. The signatories also highlight that the proposed closure would delete another safe passage especially in emergencies along Arundel Road, and would cause more significant bottleneck at the corner of Nees Roads and Park Roads, especially in emergencies, trying to make their way to Dominie Reserve. The signatories also highlight that they believe that the proposed closure will make the flow of traffic on surrounding streets increased, especially for Arundel Road West, which it would be facilitated by a new roundabout. And then this would become a cut through between Nees Road and Park Road due to the congestion at Nees Road and Park Road. Therefore, the signatories' final statement is that they please ask Council to discontinue the proposed closure of Arundel Road and consider alternative measures such as a footpath along the street, and then consider closure if that doesn't work or its further measures are justified. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Councillor Goff? No. I will put that motion. Those in favour? Sorry, there's my hand. Okay, so that is unanimous again. Thank you, councillors. And passed. Item 6.3, broader Park Orchards community against Arundel Road West closure. Councillor Lang, you would like to move that motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That the petition with 63 signatories of residents of Park Orchards objecting to the proposed closure of Arundel Road and seeking that council to reconsider the closure and the impact on the Park Orchards residents to be received and referred to the relevant officer for consideration.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Goff, thank you. Councillor Lang, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, we ask that we accept the petition tonight submitted by Arundel Road West, by a Arundel Road West resident, but representing 63 residents of Park Orchards community who have expressed that they are opposed to the permanent closure of Arundel Road West. The petition draws attention to the fact that the signatures are concerned that the proposed closure will delete another safe passage during emergencies along Arundel Road West to access Dominie Reserve, which is their safe place for Park Orchards, their safer place for Park Orchards. And this will cause a significant bottleneck at the corner of Nees Road and Park Road, especially in emergencies. The signatories highlight that that there is no evidence of safety risks that have been received because of the closure. No significant evidence for the safety risks that have been contributed to the proposed closure. The signatories also highlight that the flow of traffic to other streets will increase, especially along Arundel Road West, which I said before, which then would become a cut through between Nees Road and Park Road due to the congestion at Nees Road and Park Road. The signatories close by highlighting, Council, please consider the full impact of the road closure, not only to Arundel Road West residents, but to the Park Orchards community and residents that the proposed closure will impact. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Councillor Goff? No. I'll put that motion. Those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Item 7, public question time. We've received a couple of questions for tonight's council meeting. At this time, anyone submitting questions to council will have their questions read out by our wonderful CEO. And our first question tonight are from Wei G.
Thank you, Mayor. This question relates to item 10.1 on our agenda. We believe the planning scheme amendment and planning permit is being considered by council tonight. The first question is, the council has already approved the previous planning application, despite local residents' concerns with increased density and hazards. Approving the rezoning will make this worse. How will council address the issue?
Thank you, Mr. CEO. I'll now ask Mr. Angelo Carambas, Director of City Planning and Community, to respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, YG, for the question. The Manningham planning scheme identifies the Doncaster Hill area as the key strategic precinct for higher residential densities and mixed uses. An important consideration of the combined planning scheme amendment and development application is the impact of the proposal on the amenity and the safety of existing residents in Doncaster Hill and future residents and users of the new building if approved. So officers have addressed all the issues in the council report, and this will be further examined by an independent panel should tonight's officer recommendation be supported by the council. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Angelo. Mr. CEO, there's a second question.
Thank you, Mayor. And the second question is, approving the proposal risks rezoning and density creep. It will create a precedent that other applications will follow. How will the council resist this and future rezoning and density creep?
Thank you. Angelo, back to you.
Yep, thank you again. Look, every planning scheme amendment and development application is assessed on its own merits within a very robust framework at both the local and the state level to ensure appropriate land uses and development outcomes. Only applications with appropriate strategic justification and planning merit that is consistent with both the state and local planning policy can be approved, thus preventing inappropriate density creep. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Angelo. Our next question is from Mr. Morris Waters. Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. And Mr. Waters' concerns relate broadly to over insufficient time to respond to planning matters and responsiveness from council. And the first question is, why cannot council use more modern and quicker methods, even express post, in these important matters?
Thank you. I'll pass that question back to Angelo again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Waters, for your question. You've raised a number of sort of matters in the preamble to your question that we received tonight. So, Mr. Mayor, if it's okay, I'll take this question on notice and respond in writing to Mr. Waters as soon as possible.
Thank you. And Mr. CEO, there's a second question also.
Yeah, Mr. Waters also suggests that when ringing the general number too often a message is received, that I'm often the 14th to 16th caller in the queue, very time consuming. In addition, staff members who have direct line most never answer at once, and these messages are often left not returned promptly. In one case recently, I left a message over a 4-week period before calling back. On Friday the 11th of June, I tried to ring the staff member in integrated planning about information, only to be told that it was the day off. I then asked to speak to the manager of integrated planning, only to be told that he does not to speak to ratepayers, and no one else was available in the department. I asked why this is the case in what seems to be a very small department at a critical time when information was required to enable submissions to be lodged to the church proposal.
Thank you, Andrew. Angelo?
Mr. Mayor, again, Mr. Waters, thank you. You've raised a number of really important issues that I want to understand fully, so I will investigate the matter and respond to you in writing as soon as possible.
Thank you, Angelo. I think we're up to item 8 of admission of urgent business. There are no items of urgent business. Item 9, planning permit applications. 9.1, planning application PLN 20/0540 at 420 Thompson's Road, Templestowe Lower, for the use and development of the land for a childcare centre, construction of 42 dwellings comprising a 3-storey apartment building with 36 apartments, 4 3-storey dwellings and 2 2-storey dwellings, and alteration of access to a road in a road zone category 1. Do I have a mover for this motion?
So moved, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Stephen Mayne, and a seconder, Councillor Goff. Thank you. Councillor Stephen Mayne, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, Mr Mayor. So I'm moving that the officer recommendation be adopted. This is an important site in the Raffle ward, opposite the BP petrol station on the corner of Foot Street and Thompson's Road. So a very busy corner site. Has been a restaurant location for at least 25 to 30 years and has never really worked. I've been to a few of those restaurants over the years. They've changed hands. Anthony Koutafidis, the Carlton legend, gave it a go at one point. Everyone's had a crack. No one seemed to make it work. So I think that the isolated restaurants on main roads just generally don't work. I mean, Macca's on a corner might, but generally they need to be an activity centre. So I think we've got a great solution here with a dual purpose development of a childcare centre, a one-level childcare centre with capacity for 116 children, 25 car parks facing Thompson's Road, and then 42 dwellings at 3 levels and 10 metres, with 36 apartments and 6 townhouses, with a with a Foot Street entrance. This proposal went to our Sustainable Design Committee, and the architects on that committee, the independent architects, really loved it. Like, they were really upbeat about it. And then the submitters meeting was called, and councillors always have a little bit of trepidation going into a submitters meeting, but it was probably the friendliest submitters meeting I've ever attended. And our 3 objectors, if you can call them that, Patricia Cooper, Mary Corcoran and Joan Ryan, who all live in the Templestowe Manor Retirement Village abutting this site. They were nominally objectors, but they were actually quite pleased. They've had great relations with the proponent, who has really engaged with them sensitively and thoroughly. And they're absolutely not going to VCAT, the objectors said. And at the end of the day, they really did quite like it, but just a bit concerned about a few issues such as speeding traffic and would the kids be safe. So we will try and advocate to get big roads to perhaps slow the traffic going down Foot Street, particularly flying around the corner. But overall, this is a very nicely designed proposal, and I very much hope that they will fulfil their promise if we give them a permit of having the site demolished by Christmas, and then construction starting. It will have a car stacker. I'm never a big fan of car stackers, but the apartments will have 50 parking spots. 36 of them will be with a mechanical stacker. So that'll be interesting for Lower Templestowe. I'm not too sure there's too many of them around. But it complies with all our planning rules. The officers are recommending it. The objectors quite like it. So this is a good development, and look forward to seeing it being constructed with what is very much an eyesore site at the moment, with graffiti and overgrown grass and fencing. Just get that demolished, and let's get a really nice design childcare residential on this pivotal corner site in Lower Templestowe.
Thank you, Councillor Stephen Mayne. Councillor Goff, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I'll endorse all the things that Councillor Mayne has said about that site. It has been a difficult site in Manningham, even from when those restaurants first went up there, which would have to be prior to late 80s, in the 80s, somewhere along that time that those restaurants went in there. But all in all, over all of that period of time, they have never been super successful, as they've changed hands a number of times, and then a lot of them have been empty, especially the one on the closest to the corner for many years. So it's a resolution of fitting back into residential 1. Now, they would have always been in residential 1, but there would have been a special permit given to put restaurants there. And I think this is a far better solution to have the residential and the childcare into that particular location. For some strange reason, and I suppose, as I've said a number of times to people, not many parks and trees go into restaurants or to anything to have a coffee, because it's surrounded by 1/3 of parkland. Then there's a service station and whatever, and none of the other surrounding streets or roads go anywhere near that corner. So it's quite an isolated spot. And the solution of having the childcare centre accompanied with the 2 other forms of dwelling, townhouses and having apartments in that location is quite good. Yes, it does have a number of public transport routes going past it, and so therefore it is in a great location within Manningham for those residential purposes. And as we pick on the map, if you're fit, you can walk up a hill. You've got Templestowe Village, which is very, very close to you. So all the amenities are around there for people. And I think it's a fantastic looking drawing and concept of an idea of what can go onto the corner. And I'm glad that they've packed that amount of stuff into that area for that corner, because it would have been a waste if it was 2 or 3 residential blocks. So with let's say 3 units on each block, I think that would have looked really average. What is going here, I think, will be a benefit for our whole community.
Thank you, Councillor Goff. Are there any speakers against the motion? Are there any other speakers to the motion? Councillor Lang.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I very much agree with the opening of Councillor Mayne and what Councillor Goff has said. It was very clear from the submitters meeting that the proponent has addressed the needs and concerns of any objectors that who put forth any questions. In the submitters meeting, the proponent was very clear about any overshadowing and looking at different times and keeping it all within the facility itself. The proponent also talked about how the design catered for the childcare on one side of the corner and the dwellings on another, which gave privacy and a separate dual use to the property. And it also looked at looking at the ins and outs, so coming out of the residential complex and the advocacy that we can have for just making sure that that is a safe passage. So the proponent has gone through what I would say is some really great design work, and really incorporated any objections and really considered them and been able to show how they have addressed them. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Any other speakers either for or against the motion? There being no other speakers, I'll put that motion. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. And we move on to item 10, City Planning and Community. 10.1, Manningham Planning Scheme Amendment, C127 MANN and Planning Permit Application PLN 20/0303. Consideration of submissions and request for an independent panel hearing. Do I have a mover for the motion? Councillor Chen.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to move an alternative motion, please.
Thank you.
And I move that Council adopts the officer's recommendation and include the following note on draft planning permit PLN 22/0303. Note: the proponent is recommended to undertake works to the auditorium to optimize the acoustic experience and sound quality in order to maximize its functionality and community benefit. B, rise to the opponent, bracket, separate to the planning process, bracket, recommending that they undertake works to the auditorium to optimize the acoustic experience and sound quality in order to maximize its functionality and community benefit. Oh, yeah, I think that is duplicated. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
I think it's, yeah, I'm not sure if it's duplicated. I think it's an action item for it to write to the proponent.
Thank you. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chen. Would anyone like to second that alternate motion? Councillor Laura Mayne, thank you. Councillor Chen, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this item includes amendment Schedule 1 of the Activity Center of the Manningham planning scheme to alter the boundary of precinct 2C to include within it the properties at 674 to 680 Doncaster Road and 2 Short Street, Doncaster. It also includes draft planning permit application PLN 200303 applies to the properties at 674 to 680 Doncaster Road, 2 Short Street, and 14A, 16, and 18 Hepburn Road, Doncaster, to partially demolish the existing heritage listed church and use and develop the site for a 70-story mixed-use development. It also includes a draft Section 173 agreement proposed to voluntarily secure the provision of 10 apartments within the development proposed in the application for affordable housing. The agreement is between Council and the proponent. So, we received about 31 submissions from residents and occupiers, and also from the Department of Transport. And those issues relating strategic justification to the amendment, traffic transport impacts, social impacts, affordable housing, and design and use of the building. So the report of the recommendations of the if endorsed, will be sent to independent panel to consider. But one more thing tonight, and just about the alternative motion, is mainly regarding the internal acoustic of the auditorium. And the 650 capacity auditorium is one of the proposed key uses of the development. According to the Doncaster Church of Christ mission statement for the development, the auditorium will be utilized for a range of functions by the broader community, such as musical productions, including concerts, choirs, orchestras, and the like, theater group productions and plays, and complement existing facilities provided by Manningham City Council. We all know that in Manningham, we have plenty of good quality sporting facilities to meet the needs of facility users. But music is also a huge part of our lives. Unfortunately, our community venues are not versatile or flexible in accommodating for musical performance. We have plenty of musicians, both young and emerging, that could benefit from using good facilities to organize performances and give their music back to the community. If this auditorium can be properly designed to optimize the acoustic experience and sound quality, it can maximize its functionality and community benefit. Of course, internal acoustic quality cannot be included as a planning condition under the Planning and Environment Act. However, there is an opportunity to include a note on the draft permit for the applicant's information, and of course, to raise the matter with the applicant separately and outside the planning process. Permit notes are common in planning permits. They are not enforceable, but they do serve as a reminder to applicants that certain items to be considered for the application and provide a helpful source of information for applicants. So, Mr. Mayor and fellow councillors, good acoustics are a vital part of any auditorium experience. So I wish that can be considered as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chen. Councillor Laura May.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just to add on to what Councillor Chen has said, on top of referring to an independent panel to consider the 31 submissions, Council is also endorsing 3 recommendations in response to the submissions. The recommendations were in relation to ensuring car parks are available to occupiers free of charge at all times, updating dates, and a new condition that is ensuring that Doncaster Road bus buses aren't interrupted, that the interruptions are kept to a minimum. The reason the council is going through such lengths to bring this issue to several formal council meetings, referring to external bodies, etc., is because an amendment to the planning scheme is a consideration that's taken very seriously. And I just want to ensure our local community that this is an issue where we are rigidly following proper processes and aiming to be as transparent as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Main. Would anyone like to speak against the motion? Would anyone else like to speak for the motion? There being no other speakers, I'll put that motion and those in favour. And that's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. So we move on to item 11, city services, 11.1, road management plan review and adoption. Do I have a mover for this motion? Councillor Carly Lang.
I move that the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Chen. Councillor Lang, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just quickly, the road management plan review and adoption is a motion to an opportunity for the road management plan to go out onto public exhibition. And I would just like to say that going out into public exhibition, that it comes with the inclusion of visual representations, clarifying the owners and council's responsibility in regards to driveways, crossovers, footpaths, curbs, table drains, and pipe and end walls and roads. And that's a welcomed inclusion in our road management plan for Manningham. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Councillor Chen.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And probably everyone was surprised to know that we in Manningham, we have 609 kilometers local roads, 783 kilometers of footpaths, pathways, and 887 kilos of curb and channel. What a job for our officers to maintain, because council is responsible for the management, maintenance, and development of the local road network within Manningham under the Road Management Act 2004. So in accordance with the requirements of the Act, council adopted Manningham Road Management Plan on that year on 30th of November, with updates approximately every 4 years. So the plan specifies the intervention levels and response time to inspect roads and road infrastructure in order to make safe. So programmed maintenance activities are covered in another document that is the asset management plan. So as Councillor Lam mentioned about, we have the visual image and that help our residents to understand the responsibility of what do what. And so that will probably help our residents to better understand the responsibility so they can manage their driveway properly. So hopefully if approved by council tonight, a notice of proposed amendments. I remember the previous one that was about 25 pages. So this new update is about 35 pages with visual images. So it will go out to public consultation, daily newspaper, government gazette, and on council's website via Manningham USA, and officers will consider all those submissions and will report back to council for adoption in October. So stay tuned.
Thank you, Councillor Chen. Are there any speakers against the motion? There being no speakers against, are there any speakers for the motion? Being no other speakers, I'll put that motion. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. And we move on to item 12, shared services. 12.1, Procurement Policy Review under the Local Government Act 2020. Do I have a mover?
So moved, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Stephen May, and a seconder. Councillor Lightbody. Thank you. Councillor Stephen May, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I'm moving that the officer recommendation be adopted. The new Local Government Act requires that councils review their procurement policy every 4 years. The legislation actually, unlike the common trend in regulation of local government, actually releases the shackles somewhat and provides a little bit more flexibility for councils to set their own delegation limits and have some of their own policies with procurement. So we've been through a very rigorous process with public consultation. We've had 2 briefings of the councillors at our weekly Tuesday night sessions. It's been through the Audit and Risk Committee. And we've come up with a new policy, which I think has come up very well. In terms of some of the changes, we've tweaked a little bit, so there's a little bit more responsibility, a little less admin burden on the CEO. There'll probably be around 90 tenders a year rather than 120. And so, for instance, we've now saying that that services and works, you need to be above a $250,000 spend to have a mandatory tender, whereas previously it was 150,000 for services and 200,000 for works. And on things like the delegations, the CEO can't spend more than 5 million. The directors have been lifted to 500,000. Group managers can spend 250,000. So that's a little bit creating more responsibility and autonomy for the execs rather than the previously administratively burdensome, lots of tenders, CEO for always getting dragged into it type approach. There's an increased emphasis on things like buying local, which is terrific, and also on ESG issues, environmental, social, and governance issues. We're also looking to collaborate more with some of our neighbours. So the 5 councils that make up the Eastern Region group, we've been tweaking our policies and looking to do more shared service tendering with them, along with the Northern Council Alliance. We've also got MAV procurement, we've got Procurement Australia, and we've got the recent energy purchase that Darebin put together. So there's a fair bit going on in group procurement, and our procurement policy facilitates and encourages the further development of that collaborative system rather than every council going their own way. So I'd like to thank our Head of Procurement, Molly Quay, who's done a great job in overseeing this process. Molly was actually Head of Procurement at City of Melbourne. Sorry, Councillor Kleiner, when I was there, and she was Head of Procurement there. So she lives in Manningham. We're very lucky to have her. She's an absolute gun in the area. And I think I'm very confident with Molly in charge of this process. The presentations were incredibly thorough. And I think that the community can be assured that you will deliver, this will deliver good transparency and good value for money, and continuing the theme of overall of Manningham being a well-governed, financially strong, responsible and transparent council.
Thank you, Councillor May. Councillor Lightbody, would you like to speak to the motion at all? No? Are there any speakers against the motion? Any other speakers for the motion? I will put that motion. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Thank you, and that's carried unanimously again. Thank you, councillors. Item 12.2, our 10-year financial plan 2021-22 to 2030-31. Do I have a mover for this motion, please? Councillor Stephen May again. Would you like to?
The seconder?
Would you like to clarify what you're moving?
Yes, I am moving that the recommendation be adopted for the 10-year financial plan.
Thank you. And do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Lang.
Motion.
Thank you. Councillor Stephen May, would you like to speak to the motion?
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So 10-year financial plans are a relatively new thing for councils. We didn't have to do one when I was first elected in Manningham in 2009, and I don't think we did have one initially back then. Some councils voluntarily got into it, and then the Local Government Act 2020 mandates that all councils must deliver at least a 10-year financial plan. So we've gone for the minimum, the 10 years. You have to get it done by October 31 after the election. So it's been decoupled from the budget process, which has to be done by the end of June, which I think is good. It gives you more time to crunch the numbers. But to be honest, once you've done the budget, which is a 4-year process, there's not a great deal more to be said for the 10-year process, 10-year financial plan. So that probably explains why we didn't have any submissions from the community. So the 10-year plan pretty much confirms what is set out in the budget, that yes, we've increased our proposed capital spending to $54 million a year. In terms of some of the big numbers we're looking to spend, 44 million on new community facilities. I'd love to see a new library, but we'll work it out amongst our councillors as to where we're going to put that money. But that's a big spend. 47 million on new open public space improvements, and overall 1.52 billion on service delivery. So council's in a strong position. I remember when we first got some graphs on our cash balance trends, it was already showing that we're already north of 70, and on the steady state, we were going to be heading to perhaps double that in 10 years. So we have cranked up the capital, and so now the 10-year financial plan is projecting basically cash to be sort of steady at around the 60, 70 million rather than doubling, and that's going to hopefully be new libraries. We've cranked up spending on all our basic infrastructure. Waste is going to be significant initiatives. So the 10-year plan spells all that out. Importantly, it says that we've got no debt and we'll never have any debt. So the community can rest assured that unlike every other level of government, debt does not feature at Manningham. If anything, we have a healthy cash balance. So I'd like to thank all the officers, particularly John Gorst, the CFO. I know that Rob Spargo, the former CFO, will be thrilled to see that his 33% must be spent on capital is still in there. He had that in there for many years, and it's a very healthy criteria to make sure we don't become like the inner city lefty councils who spend all their money on services and don't put the appropriate amounts into capital. So it's a good plan. We'll be updating it each year, and I think we should unanimously endorse these, councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Main. Councillor Lang?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I agree with Councillor Stephen Main's enthusiasm. I am pleased that the 10-year financial plan encompasses our community vision, which has been very important to us and has really been a core focus on lots of our policies. I just wanted to bring our core principles to attention, though the 10-year financial plan really does focus, as Councillor Stephen Main said, on financial stability. It does look that we will continue to operate and live within our means. It does look to prioritise our funding. It does look to prioritise renewing before new and expanding assets. And it also continues to fund technology and innovation. I'm also extremely pleased that the 10-year council financial plan incorporates, as Councillor Main said, 44 million allocation for the development of community facilities, 9 million on waste initiatives, 47 million on our open space improvements, 5 million towards our strategic fund so that we can continue to operate as a sustainable council. And I particularly favour and love the inclusion of newer initiatives for sustainability and the environment, including precinct planning and community support. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Are there any speakers against the motion? Are there any other speakers for the motion? Thank you, Councillor Climate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just want to second what Councillor Lang had said with regards to our financial principles. And it should be noted that there are many councils in Victoria that don't have overarching financial principles. And this is something that we in Manningham have. We take it very seriously, and it goes in line with very much our council plan. So we're about to hopefully endorse our council plan in accordance with the Local Government Act. But in saying that, it's so very harmoniously aligned. Our financial, we're a stable council, and we should be proud of that because we've always taken those principles we as a council, as a new council every term, come together about those principles and making sure that we're comfortable with that, that we're going to maintain them, and the organisation then that filters down. So in all that the organisation does to bring in the budget and present the financials, they know that that's our focus. So thanks to the officers that have worked tirelessly and very hard to put this together, because again, like has been said, this is the first time it's actually been mandated. So a lot of work goes into this with the new council in ensuring that we have a clear direction moving forward. And I really commend and congratulate the officers' work with us on this.
Thank you, Councillor Kleiner. Are there any other speakers? There being no other speakers, I'll put that motion. Those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We now move on to item 13, Chief Executive Officer items. 13.1, Council Plan 2021 to 2025. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Laura May.
I move that the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you. And do I have a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Councillor Lang. Councillor Laura May, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Everyone, we are here. We made it after 12 months of work. Today, we will hopefully be adopting our council plan. If you're someone who's been attending several council meetings, you would have heard about this item before. Though if you haven't, this is the document that captures our strategic direction of this council group over our 4-year term. It's set around our 5 goals: healthy community, livable places and spaces, resilient environment, vibrant and prosperous economy, and a well-governed council, with more detailed initiatives, actions and plans within each of these goals. Engagement was key to this task, involving the plan in Manningham Community Survey, our extensive deliberative engagement sessions with our community panel, targeted conversations with community groups, council and staff workshops, and a public display period. Council has been still working on making changes on this until up until very recently. After special meetings with the Reconciliation Action Plan Working Group, the plan now includes better representation of our First Nations people, an updated acknowledgement to country, and 2 new actions involving developing meaningful relationships and increasing activities to improve community understanding and conservation of areas of significance, as well as through our public display period, new actions involving the celebration of historical character and supporting community environment groups, new reference to the Yarra River Protection Bill, and other small changes. Personally, something that I was happy to see was the overarching commitment to being inclusive, as the plan explicitly considers people from multiple backgrounds and cultures, of different genders and ages, from the LGBTQI community with a disability and more, just overall celebrating our diversity and the benefit it brings, as well as a focus on environment, whether that be through our approach to climate change, proactively protecting our biodiversity. That was something that was brought up a lot in our deliberative engagement, enhancing our local parks, or improving our sustainable practices with waste, water and energy. A few of the final touches from last time was just cleaning up the graphics and making it beautiful for the eye. Lastly, I'd just like to thank the officers and everyone involved for all their hard work.
Thank you, Councillor May. Councillor Lang.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Councillor Laura Main did an excellent job of summarising it. So lots of what I was going to say, she's done. So well done, Councillor Main. I'm just very pleased that during the deliberate engagement process that was conducted on our 2021 to 2025 council plan, that the community's feedback was considered. And when we put out the draft council plan, that it was amended to incorporate the elements that were of value to our community. One of the Councillor Main mentioned both of those, but I just wanted to highlight again the city's historical character is a significant addition and valuable addition to our council plan, and how it actively looks at promoting the heritage of our city through an annual heritage festival, which I look forward to. Also, that the council will another passion of mine is that council will actively encourage and support local environmental groups. For example, your land care, your friends of, and other environmental and sustainability stewardship groups. So under the theme, and Councillor Mayne said the 5 themes, so I won't repeat those again, but under the theme of resilient environment, I am very pleased that we have the goals in our council plan to protect and enhance our environment and biodiversity, and to reduce the environmental impact so that we are able to protect our valuable assets as well as adopt to climate change. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Are there any other speakers? Sorry, are there any speakers against the motion? Are there any other speakers for the motion? There being no other speakers, I will put that motion. Those in favour? And carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. And I'd just like to also just thank all the officers involved in bringing this long process to a conclusion finally, and for your patience and listening to us as councillors along the way, as well as to the community. So thank you to that amazing team. And I'll give you a shout out to Georgina. I think you did your lion's share of the effort. So we'll move on now to 13.2, our strategic risk register. Do I have a mover for that motion? Councillor Goff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I move that the council note the strategic risk register as of August 2021.
Thank you. And do I have a seconder for that motion? Sorry, Councillor Chen. Thank you. Councillor Goff, would you like to speak to the motion, please?
Just quickly, Mr. Mayor, it is a risk register, and actually it said it all in the motion. We're noting what we've already got in our register, and our register is a living document. Now, the local government have a reporting framework that local governments have to report at certain times or about certain things, and it's a way in which the state government, I suppose, keeps control of what's happening in local government through the reporting schedules, and part of that in the process is identifying the risks. Now, this is a living document. It's not a document that we sit down once and then dream up all the risks that we can have, print it and say, what a good group are we. This is about the organisation from all levels of the organisation that meet and work through risks, identifying risks. And there's a group of senior council workers, people that, officers that actually, I suppose, process through these risks and prioritise and analyse the risks that we've got. And that's overseen by the Audit and Risk Committee, which is another independent group that is there. So what we see in these is not a report that we come up with for once that we just brainstorm. This is a report of the snapshot of the work that has been going on with all of our areas, brought together through the managers, brought together through the senior management team, and then run through and moderated with the audit committee, with the external members reporting in on that. And it is the amalgamation of information, it's culmination of quite a number of things that are in the report there that are factored into it. And it brings out our identification of some of the major risks that we have at Manningham, and which ones are the high and which are the low. So the report is pretty self-explanatory. It's not something that would change very much, because it's a report of a snapshot of what the risk register is in of this month. And that document is not static. If something happens, something adds a risk, through the processes of our operating at Manningham, that gets adapted and changed. So with that, I'd like to say that we note it.
Thank you, Councillor Goff. Councillor Chen.
Yes, and Councillor Goff started very well. And because Council deliver more than 100 services to our community, in delivering these services, Council is exposed to risks and also opportunities. If risk occurs, it will affect the outcomes and objectives of Council. Therefore, Council needs to assess the degree of risk attached to each decision and decide whether the degree of risk is acceptable and implement plans to reduce or eliminate the risk. If the risk is unacceptable, Council may decide not to pursue a particular course of action. So this report provides assurance to Council and community that key risks are identified, monitored, and regularly reviewed to ensure effective control systems are in place. So the next cycle of strategic risk review is due in October and November. So we just constantly review and just give our community and Council a peace of mind that risks are actually monitored and reviewed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chen. Are there any speakers against this motion? Are there any other speakers for the motion? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. And we move on to item 13.3, bulk retirement of council endorsed policies. Do I have a mover? Councillor Goff.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to move something slightly different to what's on the paper. I'll be moving that A, the recommendation be adopted, and B, that council receive regular updates on the policies that are noted as being developed to replace the retired policies.
Thank you, councillor.
Part A, that the recommendation be adopted, and part B, that council receive regular updates on the policies that are noted as being developed to replace the retired policies.
Thank you, councillor. Do I have a seconder? Sorry, I'll just mute you, Councillor Goff. That's all right. Councillor Kleiner, thank you. Councillor Goff, would you like to speak to the motion? Sorry, now you have to unmute.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for the opportunity. And this motion comes up, I suppose, when councils come in and are creating policies constantly and then finding them. And in fact, if I can just share with people, one of my first frustrations on council was every time I had a good idea about something, we had a policy about it, and the policy meant that I couldn't do it. So for years, that was occurring because there'd be lots of policies, and unless you were a magician, we did have actually to say one thing, Mr. Mayor, and it is on this. We did have all of our policies in one location, and it was in the council room there, but they were all in binders and folders, and if you didn't know which folder to go to and look at, you had very little ability to find it. I believe it's very important that our policies that we do hold at Manningham, and also a lot of the practices and the way in which we do things need to be documented so the community have an understanding and the reassurance to know how we act and why we act and what our policy is towards things. And that needs to be accessible to the community and an ability in the community and to be able to find it. And so coming out of this, there was the looking at our policies, because our policy registers didn't have all of our policies. There were a whole lot of policies that were not appearing on our net and everything else. Not that that's unusual for governments, but it's good to get it in order, and it's a long process. And I'd like to thank all of the people that have been working towards, and it goes down to each department, looking at the policies that affect them. They've looked at what's relevant, what is irrelevant, what's needed, what is not needed, and look through and sort of, we've got a bit of a cull on a number of policies that are redundant, are taken up in other policies. And if I could just quickly explain, we had a motion, Mr. Mayor, a number of weeks ago on flags, but getting the actual policy that we actually had, and at the time I did know our policies, but it wasn't stored under flag policy, it was stored under Aboriginal reconciliation, and it affected the flag policy without the flag policy being updated. So the flag policy all of you guys are going on was something that was 8 years prior, 9 years prior. So it was about 10 years old. So basically we didn't get the copy of the current one because of how things were done and buried. And that in the future will hopefully be sorted out. So there's a lot of work that has gone into talking of policies, and a lot of the things are just practice notes or ways in which we do things, and they're not necessarily at a policy level. And it's good to retire them out of our system so that they don't bog down and our websites and our information is not confusing by having two different policies and things like that. So I know there's a lot of work in it, and I've been told by people there's a lot of work in it, and I do actually appreciate that. So we're getting there, and this is the first start of actually retiring those policies. There are other policies in the place. By the way, we have a lot more policies that are in existence that aren't retiring. That's just a list of policies that we are retiring through this extensive search, and I look forward to the reorganisation so that the community can readily access what we're on about and why we're on about it, and seek our policies that are correct. So I hope that councillors support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Goff. Councillor Climate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this supports our council theme of a well-governed council. As you can tell from the information in there, some of those policies are over 25 years old, and they no longer aid decision making. In some cases, the new Local Government Act supersedes many of them that are there. There's some policies that were about the roles and responsibilities of the mayor, but now with the Local Government Act, much clearly defining that as an example. So it's very good that the organisation has spent a lot of time, and I'm sure there'll be more time spent as when you open a file. I'm sure that there's many more other policies that are old and are already, they're redundant. This is just really cleaning up the process. I think it's very good. It also highlights to us the role of us as councillors, that we are the policy framework makers essentially, and these are policies that have been endorsed over the years by councillors that have been elected by their community. So it's not to say that the work wasn't done. It's that task or the lifespan of that policy has come to an end, and something new and more refreshed and more in keeping with today's is relevant. So it's a really simple one, but quite an extensive. A lot of work has gone into, every directorate has fed into this process, and so a lot of staff involved, and we thank you very much for the work that's been done.
Thank you, Councillor Climate. Other speakers against the motion? No. Are there any other speakers for the motion? Thank you, Councillor Main.
I'd like to start by thanking Councillor Goff for coming up with this excellent idea of doing an audit of all of our policies. I was amazed to see that we came up with, I think it was maybe 60 that we've retired here. So congratulations to the officers for incredibly efficiently dragging in all service units to review all policies and come up with a mass cull. Not since Tony Abbott got elected, when they did a mass cull, has there been a level of government going in like this. So for those who like, small government efficiency, less bureaucracy, less red tape, less clutter, this is an excellent exercise. So congratulations to Councillor Goff for getting this off the way. Didn't even need a motion to get the officers jumping into action. And what a quick turnaround to have it even before 12 months in to have a mass cull. In terms of what we're killing, I love some of these. Helicopter landing policy, out she goes. The joint development and use agreements policy, that was the MRA, and when we had sort of the community building our basketball stadiums. Now we do it all ourselves. We don't do joint development uses. I don't know what a neighbourhood agreement policy is, but that's no longer a policy, and there's no longer any neighbourhood agreements apparently. We didn't need 3 policies for Young Citizens of the Year, Citizen of the Year, and Citizen and Young Citizen of the Year, so they're all gone. Testing for capital works, not sure what that was. There was another one for incompleted capital works. Now we just take a bond. So if you don't finish the job, we'll use your bond and finish it for you. We don't need a policy on that. and lots of other interesting reading here. So I love the idea of getting as many of our policies on the website as possible. I don't think we have all our policies on the website at the moment. So a great way to get to that goal is to start by getting rid of 60 policies you don't need, and then let's show the world the hundreds of other policies that we've actually got. We deliver over 100 services. We're big, complex beasts. We need lots of policies. We need to know what we're doing. So well done to Councillor Goff and to the officers for delivering this excellent outcome. And I think we should encourage all 550 councils across Australia to do this exercise. I've never heard of it before. I'm amazed at what it's produced. And I think Manningham's showing the way on how to get things done.
Thank you, Councillor Stephen May. Are there any other speakers? There being no other speakers, I'll put that motion. Those in favour? And carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Item 13.4, review of Manningham's governance rules. Do I have a mover?
I move that the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor Stephen Mayne. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Lang, Councillor Stephen Mayne.
Thank you, Mayor. So this process of a reasonably comprehensive upgrade of our governance policies comes from a motion in January requesting the officers to look at a few issues. And based on the table that's been lodged with the report, they have looked at all the issues that were raised, and some have been adopted and some haven't. But I'd really like to thank Carrie Bruce and Andrew McMaster for doing a thorough job. Quite a few tweaks have been picked up, and I want to briefly just go through them. So the officers can now, councillors can now call for an officer presentation at a council meeting to explain a complex issue. So, and we've got to give 6 days notice, so we can't ambush the officers on the night. This is good. Officers often know more than councillors. Get them up, get them talking. They're experts. Let's involve them in the meeting. Notices of meetings by politically active councillors no longer need 14 days notice, only 6. So you can come out of your briefing the Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, you can get up and get something on the agenda for the next week. We don't need 2 councillors to do it. We're sticking with the current policy of 1 councillor can put up a motion. Rather than just only having councillor questions at the end of the meeting, we're now having councillor questions and reports, but strictly limited to 2 minutes. So there'll be no banging on, councillors, but we can, at the end of the meeting, actually just report back on stuff that's been going on in the community, telling people what's happening rather than having to frame it of, is the mayor aware that, you know, which is, you just want to say something's happening, but you got to frame it as a question. So we've liberalised that standing item on the agenda. Less informal meetings will be reported. So next time Councillor Diamonte has a ward planning meeting, we won't see the agenda published because it's just 1 meeting with 2 officers. Now it's just going to be all councillors meeting, or, you know, bigger stuff. So we haven't got 20 tiny meetings getting reported on a monthly basis that absolutely no one's interested in. So again, efficiency, less clutter. A couple of final ones that you don't have to have a speaker against for the mover to make a closing comment. So the old system was tended to be it's only adversarial. So if someone's against it, you can rebut them. Whereas now you can just put a bookend at the end of a happy unanimous discussion. And that's just facilitating more discussion. I think they're the major ones I was going to mention. There's no opportunity for second questions at the end from the public. They'll put that one up and that went down. And we offered the CEO a chance for him to say, I want the officers to have a presentation. The officer said, no, we don't want the right to do a presentation. So that was unusual for a group of councillors to offer more power to the officers, and the officers say, no, we don't want it. You can be the dominant players in the council meeting. So, but we'll ask you a few times, Andrew. Just give us the nod, and we'll make sure we ask you if you want one of your directors to speak. So yeah, as I said, thanks to the officers, a really good process. So this now goes out to the community for a public consultation process. Under the law, you can't change your governance rules without a consultation process. And then all things going well, approved at the October council meeting, and we're in place for November 1, where hopefully we can have a non-Zoom meeting and put some of these things into practice in person. But thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Stephen Mayne. Councillor Lang.
Nothing further to add. Thank you to Councillor Mayne for going through all the bits and pieces.
Okay, is there any speakers against the motion? There being no speakers against, and it not being a formal policy yet. Oh, sorry. Thank you. There being no speakers against. Councillor Laura Mayne, you'd like to say something?
Yeah, speaking
for
Yep,
audience. Yeah, sorry, just checking. Yeah, I just have a few things to add. I'm just happy to see that standing to speak is no longer compulsory, though that's not really an issue with Zoom meetings. Though I believe it's preferable to stand when speaking at our in-person meetings. As a tall person with bad eyesight, I'm just glad to have that as a security blanket to be able to sit and read my notes more clearly if need be. And then also glad to see that fors and against will be automatically recorded in the minutes, ultimately leading to less divisions and improving our overall transparency with our community. And I'd like to again thank the officers. Thanks. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Loramain. Are there any other speakers? There being no other speakers, I'll put that motion. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. That brings us to 13.5, informal meetings of councillors. And do I have a mover? Councillor Climate?
That the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor Climate. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Diamonte. Councillor Climate, would you like to speak to the motion at all? No. Councillor Diamonte? Any other speakers? I'll put that motion. Those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Again, thank you, councillors. Item 13.6, documents for sealing. Do I have a mover? Councillor Jeff Goff.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move this. And I just realised I haven't got it on my big iPad and I've got it on my phone now.
Would you like someone else to move it?
No, it's all right. I can read it. So I'd like to read that move that the recommendation be adopted with the addition of the following agreements. Consent to build over easement agreement under section 173 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987. Council and Mrs. and K.E. Summarily, 90 Golden Way, Bulleen. Consent to build over easement agreement under section 173 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987. Council and A. Economides and V. Economides. 7 Wallara Close, Doncaster East. And then consent to build over easement agreement under section 173 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987. Council and A. Latifi and K. Latifi at 58 McLaughlin Street, Templestowe.
Thank you, Councillor Goff. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Diamonte. I'll put that motion. Those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Item 14, urgent business. There are no items of urgent business. Item 15, councillors' question time. Councillors, does anyone wish to raise a question? Councillor Goff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Am I still on?
Yes.
I'd like to ask a question, I suppose, to the CEO, but whether he's heard about it anyway about council officers or the state government departments asking council officers to sign confidentiality, any sort of confidentiality agreement. I have of an understanding, and it's my understanding, that there have been briefings by DWELP asked for council officers, and people that have been there have been asked to sign confidentiality agreements to continue in the meeting. If not, they would be leaving. They're not welcome to stay in the meeting. Is he aware of any of that happening? And is the first question. And the second one, has anyone from Manningham been asked or have had to sign confidentiality agreements with DWELP or any other state government department?
I will refer that to the CEO. Thank you.
Well, thanks for the question, Councillor Goff. In relation to planning matters specifically, I had a conversation with the Director of City Planning and Community today, and we're not had any requirement in relation to planning matters to sign confidentiality agreements in relation to Manningham, but I'm certainly aware that there has been, as I understand it, circumstances in other councils where that may well have been the case. In relation to confidentiality agreements, we have from time to time signed confidentiality agreements in relation to major projects such as the North East Link project, particularly ones that are bigger and obviously have commercially in confidence issues related to them, so that it allows us to have some early access to understand what some of those projects are. But in relation to planning matters, such as the ones you refer to, we've not been asked at this stage to sign confidentiality agreements, to my knowledge.
You have to, sorry, Councillor Goff, you need to unmute.
Am I unmuted?
Yep.
Beautiful. I'm glad I could put the N instead of an M in that word. So basically, the second question is, I'm just wondering. I just asked to see if I get a report back, if there'd be a way in which, if people were required to sign those confidentiality agreements, we would be able to report which department and who they're with in a reporting mechanism back, that these people have needed to do that in the thing of their work. Because indeed, you know, the briefings that people have been taken from have been in amendments of an Environment and Planning Act, which is I suppose a policy that hasn't been enacted yet, but there's secrecy around, or not enacted, secrecy around its development and all the rest. So and there's concern. But if I can go into the fact of, is there a possibility of getting a register? And look, in some cases, I'm not saying it's wrong, but I just think we need to be open and transparent.
No, we can. Thank you, Councillor. We can certainly come back to Council with some advice on that. Obviously, it's in line with your just adopted council plan commitment to increasing transparency. So we can certainly consider that and come back to Council with what some of the options might be on that.
Thank you, CEO. Are there any other questions from councillors? No, I think we're all done. Item 16. Confidential reports. There are no confidential reports. And there being no further items on the agenda, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us to observe tonight's proceedings. And I declare the meeting closed.